Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the City Update. I'm your host Mark Aaron, Multimedia Design Manager for the City of Danville. In this week's episode we are going to discuss the 2010 session of the Virginia General Assembly. Lawmakers wrapped up that session on March 14th. They will be heading back to Richmond for veto session in just a couple of weeks, so we thought it would be a great time while our lawmakers were back in town to get an update from them on this previous session. So joining me today is Delegate Danny Marshall, representative of the 14th District, which encompasses the City of Danville, a portion of Pittsylvania County, and parts of the City of Martinsville. So, Delegate Marshall, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for letting us be here today. So it's always important to make sure the citizens know what we did for them and to them in session. So it was a very interesting session going into session, with the budget situation that we had. I really would have thought that we might even still be in session. So I think that it ended up to be a productive session given the dire straits of the economy that we are in now.
And I know it was a busy time, and you only went over by one day.
That's right,
as you mentioned. So, and I know budget was the talk throughout session.
It was.
I know we saw billions of dollars of cuts in spending, but no general tax increases in this budget. I want to get your thoughts, I guess, overall on the budget. Are you satisfied with the budget that was adopted?
Well, first of all, for the citizens, let me a little bit about how the budget works. Governor Kane in December introduced a budget for the General Assembly. And so, of course, at that time, he's governor, and then at that time it was Governor-elect McDonald is not sworn in until the 1st of January. Right. So Kane introduces a budget, and then when McDonald is sworn in, then the budget comes to the General Assembly. So the House and the Senate basically take the budget apart and tweak it. So given the situation where we were with a budget that, shortfall in revenue. Now let me explain the shortfall in revenue. The shortfall in revenue is a shortfall in revenue of projected amount of money that we thought was going to come in.
Right.
So the year before that, back in 2008, when Governor Kane introduced a budget, he projected that we were going to have so much income. That amount of income did not come, so that's why we had to reduce the budget. So given that, I think that to answer your question, I think that given the situation, we do have a good budget. And I know that there's some people out there that will not agree with it, but I think that at the end of session, we have to balance our budget. We cannot do what the folks over in Washington does. We cannot go borrow money from China. We have to balance our budget.
That was a good point. That's the point I wanted to make. We have to present a balanced budget, and also we're on a 2-year budget cycle.
That's
Explain
correct.
that as
That's
well
right.
to our viewers.
So the fiscal year for the state of Virginia will start July 1 of this year, and then it will go for 2 years. And so the budget that was introduced is, like you said, is a 2-year budget. So this will set the spending for the state, all the state agencies for the next 2 years. Now, when we go back to session next year, they will have if the income goes up or if the income goes down, then we can change that budget, tweak it a little bit. But basically, we have a 2-year budget.
And I know that two of the state's biggest expenses, of course, are education and health and human services.
That's right.
And we did see
two-thirds of the budget are K through 12 and health and human services.
And I know they were not saved from cuts this year. I guess there was no way around it, really.
It's really no way around it because, again, 2/3 of the pie is those agencies, and so when you have that large of a budget hole, if we'd have taken out the whole other third, wouldn't have made up for the budget income loss that we had. So we have to do something of that nature.
And tell me, as you look as a delegate representing the City of Danville, portions of Pittsylvania County, the City of Martinsville, when we're looking at cutting education or health and human services, what are some of the things that you look at and say, we really don't need to touch that when it comes to cuts? Is there anything that was really that you wanted off the table during this session?
Well, you really can't have anything off the table.
Right.
So everything was on the table. I mean, it's some of the things that, again, when K through 12, you would like in a perfect world not to cut that. The health and human services, you would not like to cut that.
Right.
Because the health and human services, they're the most vulnerable of our citizens who really need help from the government. But the problem is it's really pretty simple. You got so much income, and Governor Kane, when he introduced the budget, and Governor-elect McDonnell asked him not to do this, but he did it anyway. He introduced the budget with a 17% increase in income taxes, and also increased the fees about $170 million. And so how he was going to raise income by taxing the citizens and raising those fees.
Right.
And so the budget that was adopted has no tax increase.
Took that tax increase out that King recommended.
And so when you take that tax increase out,
then make up that shortfall somewhere.
That's right, and that was about $1 billion a year.
Okay, great. Now, when we talk about education, though, I know pre-K. We look at the the 4-year-olds. That was not cut as much, because I know with the Grove Park Preschool here in Danville, they didn't see that much of a cut when it comes to pre-K. Is that correct?
Right. It is, and one of the other things that we have done is also allow K through 12 more flexibility in how they want to spend the money.
Okay.
In the past years, a program, for example, pre-K, we would give money and specifically put X number of dollars back to the city school system or Pennsylvania County for pre-K. So what we have done now is give a little bit more flexibility, so the money comes back to like the Danville school system, and they choose where that money is going to go to, because what we thought that given this dire economic situation we're in, that different school systems probably have different priorities, and so that was the whole reason.
Okay. And I know it's a real complicated formula for the way that the money is dispersed from the state to the localities for education.
Right.
And I know there was talks during the session about freezing the amount. Can you explain that to
what
us?
happened is that Governor Kane, in his budget, froze. It's called the Composite Index, a local Composite Index. This has been a formula that's been on the books for 40 years. And what that means, it's a community's ability to pay for education. Now let's go back to last year's numbers. And let's just say that the amount of money that the city of Danville got for per student for a K through 12 education was about $6,200. For Fairfax County, that is one of the richest counties in the state of Virginia, one of the richest counties in the nation, they got $2,200 per student. And so the extra money was made up by in local real estate taxes in Fairfax County.
Right.
So that composite index was frozen. Now the problem is that we had to unfreeze that. If we hadn't, the ACLU said they're going to sue the state. And so then that would have opened us up for a lawsuit that we would have had to defend, and we wouldn't have had a budget, and we'd have been in court. We had to do away with Governor Kane's freezing of that right away.
Okay. And then when it comes to economic development, I know most of that money stayed in the budget. McDonnell was looking for about $50 million.
That's
I think
correct.
$46 million stayed in the budget, which is a good thing, of course, for Southside Virginia.
It is, and I agree 100%. With McDonnell's proposal, I think the best way to get us out of this economic situation is to grow the economy. We can't tax our way out. We can't borrow our way out. We have to grow jobs. And if we get people back to work and we get our unemployment rate down, it does a number of things. First of all, it gives them money so they can provide for their families, but it also provides taxes to the state, taxes to the locality. It spends money in the marketplace, which helps other businesses. So I think he's 100% right on target. And again, I wish our federal government would do the same thing, is try to grow the economy. That's how we're going to get out of this situation. We got to grow jobs.
Well, I know you're a great spokesman for economic development for Southside Virginia in Richmond, and that shows in some of the bills I know that Governor McDonnell asked you to carry actually during this session, one of those being House Bill 555, and that dealt with enterprise zone funds, and that was kind of a hot topic going into session. Can you explain that a little bit about the funding for those enterprise zone grants?
Well, this was an idea that I picked up on last year on the campaign trail. And enterprise zones are there's about 30 of them, about 50 of them statewide. Okay. And City of Danville has one, and like the whole city is not an enterprise zone, but a part inside of the city. City Council determines what part of the city will be an enterprise zone, and not all localities have enterprise zones. Again, that's 50. Right. So what, like here in the city, if a business wants to locate in that business and create jobs, or either renovate a building, they can apply to the enterprise zone for a grant. Now, there are two pieces of the enterprise zone. The person could get money for creating jobs, but he also could get money paid back to him for rehabilitating a building. So, and it was 50-50. So, due to the budget problems, we have only don't have a full pot of money there. So, we've only been able to basically give him money back about 45% return.
Right.
So, what the bill that I put in says that given the situation where economic we're in, that the first money that will go is to jobs. And so we will fully fund jobs, and whatever money is left over then will fund rehabilitation of buildings. Because ultimately, again, what we need to do is create jobs.
Right.
And so we will be able to create jobs. Now, the other piece of the bill that I added a piece that in areas of high unemployment, and I define high unemployment as 150% of the state average.
Right.
If you have that, then you can also get a jobs tax credit or a jobs grant in areas of high unemployment.
And I know you worked with our Economic Development Office to gather input on this,
yes,
because we use this as a recruitment tool for industry here in the city of Danville.
It is, and there's not one tool in the economic toolbox. There's there's a lot of them, and because not one of them fits, there's a lot of them for different areas in the city. So we just trying to give different opportunities for the economic developers to bring jobs here. Another bill that the governor asked me to put in on his behalf is a bill that the Governor's Opportunity Fund is money that the governor can help lure a business into an area. But the current law states that if a locality wants to do that, they have to have some skin in the game. They either have to match what the governor's money is being put in either dollars or either in kind. Well, the problem with that is that in some localities, they don't have the money.
Right.
They don't have the in-kind services, or they don't have the money to put up. And so the whole purpose is trying to attract business to a locality, and if a locality can't match, then we shot ourselves in the foot. So the bill that I put in, the governor asked me to put this in on his behalf, says that at the governor's, if he wants to, he can waive that requirement. So if a locality cannot match, they have to prove they can't match.
Right.
But if they can't match, then they will be able to, the governor can waive that requirement.
Very good. Well, Danny, I know we're just scratching the surface. I've got at least 4 or 5 more bills that I know that you patron or co-patron that I want to discuss as we go into the second half of the show.
Sure.
We're going to have to take a quick break. When
Okay.
we come back, we'll discuss those bills and more. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to this week's edition of the City Update. We're discussing the 2010 session of the Virginia General Assembly. My guest today, Delegate Danny Marshall, represents the 14th District, which encompasses the city of Danville, portions of Pittsylvania County, and the city of Martinsville. And Danny, before we left on break, we talked a lot about the budget and 2 of the economic bills that you patroned and carried for the governor in this past session. And you have some other bills that we want to discuss, and we'll get started right in on these. And one of these is repayment of unemployment benefits.
Right.
And I think that really goes back to some of the issues that occurred with some of the individuals at Yorktown Cabinetry here in town.
Yeah, just for for the viewers, back in, I guess it was August of 2008, Yorktown Cabinets, due to the economy going down, had to lay off some people. So I think they laid off a little over 100 people. And so after the required time, those people were laid off, started receiving unemployment benefits. Well, what happened is Virginia Employment Commission, through no fault of the employees, no fault of Yorktown, Virginia Employment Commission paid them too much money. And so, the people, was getting these checks. They didn't know how much money they were supposed to be getting. They just getting the checks and living off the checks. And so, in about January of '09, they noticed that checks were cut by a third. And so they started calling Virginia Employment Commission and really couldn't get a good answer.
Right.
So they never got a letter from Virginia Employment Commission. The checks were just cut. I can't believe they would do that.
Yeah.
So that's another story the other day. But so they called my office, and then so we dug into it, and Virginia Employment Commission says we overpaid them. It was administrative error by Virginia Employment Commission, and by law we have to recover that money. And so it's a statute saying that they, if they overpay them for whatever reason, they have to get the money back. So I was trying to figure out what we can do. So Governor Kane at the time was going to be in Danville. And so what I did is I asked him if we could set up a loan so that the people in this case could repay these when they got a job. And then he says, well, can I do that? And I said, well, you're the governor, you can do anything you want to.
Right.